crack of thunder jolted me awake, my heart pounding in sync with the rain hammering against my tent. I'd made a terrible mistake, and now I was trapped in the middle of nowhere, alone in a storm that threatened to wash away everything, including me. It had started as a simple day hike. The weather forecast promised clear skies and mild temperatures, perfect for tackling the lesser-known trails of the Adirondacks. I'd told myself that I could handle it alone. After all, I'd been hiking these mountains since I was a kid. But as I pushed deeper into the wilderness, chasing that elusive sense of solitude, the sky began to darken. The first droplets hit just as I realized I'd wandered off the marked trail. I pulled out my phone, hoping to use the GPS to navigate back, but the screen remained stubbornly black. Dead battery. Rookie mistake. I cursed under my breath, shoving the useless device back into my pocket. That's when the heavens opened up. Rain poured down in sheets, soaking through my light jacket in seconds. The wind picked up, whipping branches into a frenzy and pelting me with leaves and twigs. I stumbled forward, squinting against the deluge, desperately searching for any kind of shelter. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the forest in stark white for a split second. In that flash, I caught a glimpse of something that didn't belong. An angular shape among the trees, too rigid and symmetrical to be natural. Hope surged through me. Maybe it was a park ranger's cabin or an old hunter's shelter. I pushed towards it, slipping on rain-slicked rocks and nearly twisting my ankle in hidden holes. The thunder grew louder, each boom feeling like it was directly overhead. My lungs burned as I gasped in the thick, humid air. Finally, I broke through a line of bushes and found myself face to face with a small, dilapidated cabin. Its wooden walls were weathered gray, the roof sagging ominously in one corner. But it was shelter, and right now, that's all that mattered. I sprinted the last few yards, my boots squelching in the mud. The porch creaked under my weight as I reached for the door handle. It was ice cold against my skin, and for a moment, I feared it would be locked. But it turned easily, and I practically fell inside, slamming the door behind me. The sudden absence of rain was almost deafening. I stood there, dripping onto the worn floorboards, trying to catch my breath. As my eyes adjusted to the gloom, I took in my surroundings. The cabin was small, just one room with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. Dusty shelves lined another, holding an assortment of canned goods and what looked like old hiking gear. A rickety table stood in the center, two mismatched chairs tucked beneath it, and in the far corner, a narrow cot with a lumpy mattress. But something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it at first, but as I moved further into the room, it hit me. This place didn't feel abandoned. There was a stillness to it. Yes, but not the musty, stale air of a long-forgotten shelter. The dust on the shelves wasn't as thick as it should have been. And there on the table, I approached slowly, my wet clothes clinging uncomfortably to my skin. A battered tin mug sat on the table's surface, and beside it, an open book. I leaned in, squinting in the dim light. The pages were dry, unmarked by the dampness that seemed to permeate everything else. Someone had been reading this recently, very recently. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with my wet clothes. I wasn't alone out here. I spun around, suddenly feeling exposed in the center of the room. The windows were grimy, offering little view of the storm still raging outside. Shadows seemed to shift in the corners, and every creak of the cabin settling made me flinch. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding thin and uncertain. "Is anyone here? I'm sorry to intrude. I just needed shelter from the storm." No response, just the continued drumming of rain on the roof and the occasional rumble of thunder. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. I was being ridiculous. This was probably just some Forest Service cabin, kept stocked for emergencies exactly like this. The book and mug? Maybe a ranger had stopped by earlier in the day. I shrugged off my sodden backpack and jacket, hanging them on the back of one of the chairs. No point in catching pneumonia on top of everything else. I'd wait out the storm, try to dry off, and then make my way back to civilization when it was safe. As I started to feel a bit more at ease, curiosity got the better of me. I began to explore the cabin more thoroughly, hoping to find something useful, maybe a radio, or at least some matches to get a fire going in the fireplace. The shelves yielded little beyond the canned goods I'd noticed earlier, most with faded labels that I couldn't quite make out in the gloom. I moved to the cot, lifting the thin blanket that covered it. The mattress beneath was bare, but something caught my eye. Wedged between the wall and the bed frame was a small notebook. I hesitated for a moment before pulling it out. If this did belong to a ranger or maintenance worker, it might have some information about the area, maybe even a map. Lightning flashed again as I opened the notebook, briefly illuminating the pages. My blood ran cold. Scrawled across the paper in jagged, frantic handwriting were the words, "IT found me. It always finds me. I can't hide." The pages that follow were filled with similar ravings, interspersed with crude drawings of eyes and twisted, inhuman shapes. I slammed the notebook shut, my hands shaking. This was wrong. All of it was wrong. I needed to get out of here, storm or no storm. I turned to grab my things, and that's when I saw it. A footprint, there on the floor where I had been standing just moments before. A wet footprint, slowly drying in the stuffy air of the cabin. But it wasn't mine. It was larger, the shape all wrong, with long, distended toes that ended in points. My breath caught in my throat. I stood frozen, ears straining for any sound beyond the storm. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, so quiet I almost missed it, a soft scraping sound coming from directly above me. I looked up at the ceiling, eyes wide with terror. Dust drifted down from the wooden beams as something shifted in the cabin's small attic space. The scraping grew louder, more deliberate. It was moving, coming towards a hatch door set into the ceiling just a few feet away. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. I watched paralyzed as the hatch slowly began to open. A gust of wet wind burst through the cabin as the storm outside intensified. The candle on the table, which I hadn't even realized was lit, flickered wildly, casting monstrous shadows on the walls. A hand emerged from the hatch, if you could call it a hand. Long, spindly fingers, too many of them, grasped the edge of the opening. I caught a glimpse of pale, mottled skin and the glint of what might have been claws. That broke my paralysis. I lunged for the door, yanking it open and plunging back into the raging storm. Rain lashed at my face as I ran, uncaring of the direction, just needing to put distance between myself and that nightmare cabin. Branches whipped at my arms, drawing blood, but I barely felt it. My lungs burned, and my legs trembled with each step, but blind panic drove me onward. I don't know how long I ran. It could have been minutes or hours. The storm seemed to last an eternity, disorienting me further. Every flash of lightning made me flinch, certain I'd see that twisted form pursuing me. But there was nothing behind me save for the dark woods and sheets of rain. Eventually, my foot caught on an exposed root, and I went down hard. I lay there in the mud, gasping for breath, the fight finally draining out of me. As I struggled to push myself up, a beam of light cut through the darkness. Voices carried on the wind, human voices. "Hello? Is someone there?" A man's voice, tinged with concern. We heard yelling. I wanted to sob with relief. I raised a shaking hand, waving weakly towards the sound. "Here! I'm over here." Two figures emerged from the gloom, dressed in the familiar uniforms of park rangers. They rushed to my side, helping me to my feet. Their questions came rapid fire. Was I hurt? How long had I been out here? Did I need medical attention? I tried to explain about the cabin, the notebook, the thing in the attic. But even as the words left my mouth, they sounded insane. The rangers exchanged worried glances. "Son, there aren't any cabins in this part of the forest," the older of the two said gently. You're miles off any marked trail. If you hadn't been yelling, we might never have found you. But I was just there. I insisted, my voice cracking. It was real. I know it was real. They led me back to their vehicle, wrapping me in an emergency blanket. As we drove down muddy service roads towards a ranger station, I stared out the window at the dark woods. The storm was finally beginning to subside, the rain reduced to a light drizzle. I wanted desperately to believe I had imagined it all, that it had been nothing more than a hallucination brought on by fear and exhaustion. But as we rounded a bend, I caught a glimpse of something through a gap in the trees. For just a moment, I saw a ramshackle cabin, silhouetted against the night sky. And there, in the window, a pale face with two large eyes stared back at me. I closed my eyes and turned away. Some things, I realized, are better left lost in the storm. The moment the lights went out, I knew this wasn't going to be an ordinary power outage. There was something in the air, a heaviness that went beyond the storm raging outside. I should have trusted my instincts and stayed upstairs with my family. Instead, I found myself descending into a darkness that would haunt me for years to come. It had been a typical summer evening in our suburban home. Mom was preparing dinner. Dad was catching up on work emails, and my little sister Emma was sprawled on the living room floor, coloring and humming to herself. I was in my room, headphones on, trying to drown out the world with music as I scrolled through social media. The first crack of thunder barely registered, but the second one made me look up. Outside my window, the sky had turned an ominous shade of green-gray. Wind whipped through the trees, bending them at unnatural angles. I pulled off my headphones just as a flash of lightning illuminated the entire neighborhood, followed almost instantly by a deafening boom. The house plunged into darkness. "Jake!" My mom's voice called from downstairs. "Can you check the fuse box? It's probably just a blown fuse." I groaned, already dreading the task. Our fuse box was in the basement, a place I avoided even in broad daylight. But I was 16, too old to be scared of a musty old cellar. "Yeah, I'm on it," I called back, trying to sound nonchalant. I fumbled for my phone, using its dim light to navigate the hallway and stairs. The storm's fury seemed to intensify with each step I took. Rain lashed against the windows, and the wind howled like a living thing. At the basement door, I hesitated. A chill ran down my spine, and for a moment, I considered making up an excuse. Tell them I couldn't find a flashlight, or that the door was stuck. But I could hear Emma whimpering upstairs, and I knew I had to be the man of the house right now. I took a deep breath and opened the door. The basement stairs creaked ominously as I descended, my phone's flashlight casting long, twisted shadows on the walls. The air grew colder, damper with each step. Our basement had always been unfinished, little more than a concrete box filled with forgotten Christmas decorations and outdated exercise equipment. But tonight, it felt like entering another world entirely. I reached the bottom of the stairs and swept my light around the room. Everything looked normal, or as normal as our cluttered basement ever looked. The fuse box was on the far wall, past a maze of cardboard boxes and old furniture. I picked my way carefully through the obstacle course, trying to ignore the way the shadows seemed to shift and move just outside my light's reach. Another flash of lightning illuminated the basement through its small, ground-level windows. In that brief, stark moment, I could have sworn I saw a figure standing in the corner. My heart leapt into my throat, and I spun around, my light darting frantically from corner to corner. But there was nothing there, just more boxes, more shadows. "Get it together, Jake," I muttered to myself. "It's just a storm playing tricks on you." I reached the fuse box and flipped it open. Everything looked normal. No trip breakers, no signs of electrical issues. I was about to head back upstairs when another flash of lightning lit up the basement. And there it was again, a silhouette, darker than the surrounding shadows, standing perfectly still in the corner. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. It had to be my imagination. A coat rack, maybe, or a stack of boxes I'd forgotten about. But as my eyes strained in the darkness, I realized with growing horror that the shape was unmistakably human. "Hello," I called out, hating how my voice quavered. "Is someone there?" No response, just the continued howling of the wind and the distant rumble of thunder. I swept my phone's light towards a corner, but it revealed nothing out of the ordinary. My pulse raced, and I could feel sweat beading on my forehead despite the basement's chill. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes fixed on that corner. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I forced myself to move carefully. One wrong step in this cluttered maze could send me sprawling, and the thought of being helpless on the floor with whatever that was unbearable. Another lightning flash. This time, the figure was closer, much closer, and it was facing me. I let out a strangled yelp and stumbled backward, knocking over a stack of boxes. They crashed to the floor with a sound like thunder, sending up clouds of dust. I coughed and sputtered, momentarily blinded. When I managed to clear my eyes and raise my light again, my blood ran cold. Standing not 10 feet away was a man, or something that looked like a man. He was tall, impossibly thin, with limbs that seemed too long for his body. His skin was pale, almost translucent in the dim light. But it was his face that made my heart stop. Where there should have been eyes, there were only dark, empty sockets. And his mouth was stretched into an impossibly wide grin, filled with needle-sharp teeth. I screamed. I screamed louder than I ever had in my life. I turned and ran, no longer caring about the obstacles in my path. I crashed through boxes, tripped over forgotten toys, but somehow managed to stay on my feet. Behind me, I heard movement, a shuffling, scraping sound that spoke of something not quite human giving chase. I reached the stairs and took them 3 at a time, my legs burning with the effort. I slammed the basement door behind me and leaned against it, gasping for breath. The rest of my family was there in the hallway, their faces a mix of concern and confusion in the dim emergency lights. "Jake, what's wrong?" my dad asked, reaching for me. "What happened down there?" I opened my mouth to explain, but no words came out. How could I describe what I'd seen? They'd think I was crazy. Hell, maybe I was crazy. Maybe the storm and the darkness had caused me to hallucinate the whole thing. But then I heard it, a soft scratching at the basement door, right behind my head. My family's eyes widened as they heard it too. The scratching grew more insistent, accompanied by a low, guttural moan that seemed to vibrate through the wood. "Everyone upstairs now!" My dad shouted, grabbing Emma and practically throwing her towards the second floor. Mom was right behind her, and I didn't need to be told twice. We raced up the stairs, the inhuman noises from the basement growing louder with each step. We huddled in my parents' room, the door locked and a heavy dresser pushed in front of it for good measure. The storm continued to rage outside, but it felt distant and unimportant compared to the terror that had invaded our home. "What was that, Jake?" my mom whispered, her arms wrapped tightly around a whimpering Emma. "What did you see down there?" I shook my head, still struggling to find the words. I don't know. There was something in the corner. It wasn't human, Mom. Its face. I trailed off as a new sound reached us. Heavy footsteps on the stairs. Slow, deliberate, getting closer with each passing second. We held our breath, pressed together in terrified silence. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs and paused. Then, one by one, they began to approach our door. Thump, thump, thump. They stopped right outside. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, a scratching sound, like long nails dragging across the wood. "We know you're in there, Jake," a voice called out. It was deep, resonant, and utterly wrong, like multiple voices speaking in unison. "We've been waiting for you for so long." I felt my dad tense beside me, ready to fight if necessary. But what could he do against something like that? "You don't belong here," I found myself saying, my voice surprisingly steady. "This is our home, our family. You need to leave." A low chuckle emanated from behind the door. "Oh, Jake. Sweet, naive Jake. We've always been here, in the shadows, in the corners of your eyes, waiting for the right moment. And now, thanks to you, we're free." The scratching intensified, and to my horror, I saw the door begin to splinter. Whatever was out there, it was strong, inhumanly strong. Just as I was certain the door would give way, a blinding flash of lightning lit up the entire house. Thunder crashed so loudly it felt like the walls were shaking. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, everything went quiet. We waited, hardly daring to breathe. Seconds ticked by, turning into minutes. Nothing. Finally, my dad summoned the courage to move the dresser and open the door. The hallway was empty. We searched the entire house, even the basement, but found no sign of the intruder. The power came back on as if nothing had ever happened. In the days that followed, we tried to rationalize what had occurred. A homeless person seeking shelter from the storm, perhaps, or some elaborate prank. But deep down, we all knew the truth. Something had come for us that night. Something ancient and hungry that lived in the spaces between reality. We moved out of that house within a week. But sometimes, on stormy nights when the power flickers, I still feel those empty eyes watching me from the shadows. And I wonder, did we really escape that night? Or did we just let something terrible out into the world? The phone rang, slicing through the storm's cacophony like a knife. I shouldn't have answered it. I shouldn't have listened. But I did. And now I can't shake the feeling that every shadow in my house is watching me, waiting to pounce. It was supposed to be a quiet night in. My husband, Mark, was away on a business trip, leaving me alone in our sprawling Victorian home on the outskirts of town. I'd always loved this house, with its ornate woodwork and secret nooks, but tonight it felt too big, too empty. The storm had rolled in just after sunset, bringing with it sheets of rain and wind that howled through the trees surrounding our property. I'd settled into the living room with a glass of wine and a book, trying to lose myself in the pages and ignore the tempest outside. Lightning flashed, illuminating the room in stark white for a split second. I counted under my breath. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, before the thunder crashed overhead, rattling the windows in their frames. The storm was directly above us now. That's when the lights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. I sighed, setting down my book and fumbling for my phone. Its screen cast a feeble glow around me as I pulled up the flashlight app. The beam cut through the darkness, creating long shadows that seemed to dance and shift with each movement. I made my way to the kitchen, searching for candles in the junk drawer. My fingers closed around a lighter just as another flash of lightning illuminated the room. In that brief moment, I could have sworn I saw a figure standing in the backyard, face pressed against the glass door. My heart leapt into my throat. I spun around, shining my phone's light towards the door, but there was nothing there. Just rain streaming down the pane and the wind-whipped trees beyond. "Get it together, Sarah," I muttered to myself. "It's just a storm playing tricks on you." I lit a few candles, placing them strategically around the living room to create a warm, comforting glow. The flames flickered in the drafts that always seemed to find their way through the old house's nooks and crannies. I wrapped myself in a blanket and tried to return to my book, but I couldn't focus on the words. Every creak of the house settling, every gust of wind, set my nerves on edge. That's when my phone rang. The sound made me jump, nearly knocking over my wine glass. Unknown number, the screen read. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail, but something, curiosity, boredom, or maybe just a desire for human contact, made me answer. "Hello," I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. For a moment, there was nothing but static. Then a voice, low, gravelly, and undeniably male, spoke. "Get out of the house. Now." I froze, my blood turning to ice in my veins. "Who is this?" I demanded, though it came out as more of a whisper. "There's no time to explain," the voice continued, urgency creeping into its tone. "You're in danger. There's someone in the house with you. You need to leave immediately." My mind raced. This had to be a prank, right? Some sick joke. But even as I tried to rationalize it, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "This isn't funny," I said, my voice stronger now. "I'm hanging up and calling the police." "Sarah, please," the voice pleaded. "I know this sounds crazy, but you have to trust me. I'm trying to save your life." A chill ran down my spine. I hadn't given him my name. "How do you know who I am?" I whispered. "That doesn't matter right now," he replied. "What matters is that you're not alone in that house. He's been watching you, waiting for the perfect moment. And now, with the storm and the power out, he thinks it's time." As if on cue, I heard a soft thud from upstairs. My breath caught in my throat. It could have been anything. A book falling off a shelf, the wind knocking something over. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. "Oh God!" I breathed into the phone. "What do I do?" "Stay calm," the voice instructed. "Do you have a car?" I nodded, then remembered he couldn't see me. "Yes, in the garage." "Good. Grab your keys and get to it. Don't turn on any lights. Don't make any noise. Just get out of there as fast as you can." My hands were shaking as I fumbled for my keys on the coffee table. Another noise from upstairs. The unmistakable sound of a floorboard creaking under weight. "He's up there," I whispered, terror threatening to overwhelm me. "I know," the voice said softly. "But you can do this, Sarah. You're stronger than you think. Now move." I crept towards the garage door, every sense on high alert. The storm seemed to have intensified, rain lashing against the windows with renewed fury. Lightning flashed again, and in that brief moment of illumination, I saw a shadow move at the top of the stairs. My heart nearly stopped. He was real. The intruder was real, and he was coming for me. I bolted for the garage, no longer caring about stealth. Behind me, I heard rapid footsteps on the stairs. A voice, different from the one on the phone, rougher and filled with malice, shouted, "Stop." I slammed the garage door shut behind me and fumbled with the car keys. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hit the unlock button. I wrenched open the driver's side door just as something heavy thudded against the garage door. "Sarah?" The voice on the phone called out. I realized I was still clutching it. "Are you in the car?" "Yes," I gasped, jamming the key into the ignition. "But he's right outside." "Oh, God! What if the garage door doesn't open?" "It will," the voice assured me. "I've made sure of it. Now drive, Sarah. Don't look back." I didn't have time to question how he could have possibly ensured the garage door would work. I hit the opener and stomped on the gas pedal. The door seemed to rise in slow motion, revealing a wall of rain beyond. Just as I was about to clear the garage, a figure appeared in my headlights. For a split second, I saw him clearly. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a dark hoodie that obscured his face. In his hand gleamed something long and sharp. I screamed and swerved, narrowly missing him. The car fishtailed on the wet driveway, but I managed to keep control. I sped down the long driveway, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. I made it. I sobbed into the phone. "I'm out. What do I do now?" "Keep driving," the voice instructed. "Don't stop until you reach the police station. I've already called them. They'll be waiting for you." Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. As I turned onto the main road, a thought struck me. "Wait," I said. "How did you know all this? How did you know about the intruder, about me?" There was a long pause. When the voice spoke again, it was softer, tinged with what sounded like regret. "Because I was supposed to be him, Sarah." My blood ran cold. "What?" "I was hired to hurt you," he continued. "I've been watching your house for weeks, learning your routine. But I couldn't go through with it. I couldn't let it happen. I felt sick. The world seemed to spin around me as I tried to process what he was saying. Why? I managed to choke out. Why me? Another pause. I don't know all the details, but it has something to do with your husband's work. He's involved in something dangerous, Sarah. Something that's put both of you in the crosshairs. Mark, my mind reeled. What could he possibly be involved in that would lead to this? I don't understand, I said, tears streaming down my face. I know, the voice replied gently, and I'm sorry I can't explain more, but you're safe now. Go to the police. Tell them everything. And Sarah, don't trust anyone, not even your husband. The line went dead. I drove through the storm in a daze, my mind struggling to make sense of everything that had happened. By the time I reached the police station, I was shaking uncontrollably. True to the stranger's word, there were officers waiting outside. As they ushered me inside, peppering me with questions I could barely answer, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in a window. I looked wild-eyed, soaked to the bone, a woman on the edge of sanity. But I was alive. Thanks to a would-be assassin with a conscience, I was alive. Now I just had to figure out why someone wanted me dead, and whether the man I'd married was somehow responsible for it all. The storm continued to rage outside, but it felt distant and unimportant compared to the tempest that had been unleashed in my life. As I sat in the harsh fluorescent light of the police station, I realized that my quiet, normal existence had been nothing but an illusion, and I had a sinking feeling that this was only the beginning. The moment our headlights flickered and died, I knew we were in trouble. But I never could have imagined the horror that awaited us at that isolated farmhouse, or the secrets its weathered walls concealed. Some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed again. My best friend Alex and I had been on the road for hours, making our way back from a weekend music festival. The storm had come out of nowhere, transforming the rural highway into a treacherous river of rain and wind. We'd laughed it off at first, cranking up the radio and singing along to drown out the thunder. But as night fell and the storm intensified, our bravado faded. Maybe we should find a place to wait it out, Alex said, leaning forward to peer through the windshield. The wipers were fighting a losing battle against the deluge. I nodded, squinting at the GPS on my phone. Looks like there's a small town about 20 miles ahead. We can. My words were cut off as the car suddenly lurched and sputtered. The dashboard lights flickered ominously before going dark. Alex swore, guiding the dying vehicle to the shoulder of the road. What the hell? I muttered, trying to restart the engine. Nothing. Not even a click. We sat in silence for a moment, listening to the rain hammer against the roof. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the desolate landscape around us. Fields stretched as far as the eye could see, broken only by the occasional gnarled tree. Well, this is just great, Alex sighed, running a hand through his hair. Any bars on your phone? I checked, my heart sinking. Nope, we're in a dead zone. Of course we are, he groaned. Okay, what are our options? I peered out into the darkness, trying to get my bearings. Another flash of lightning revealed a dirt road branching off from the highway, barely visible through the rain. In the distance, I could just make out the silhouette of a building. There, I said, pointing. Looks like a farmhouse or something. Maybe they have a landline we can use. Alex hesitated. I don't know, man. Knocking on some stranger's door in the middle of the night? Sounds like the start of a horror movie. I laughed, though it sounded hollow even to my own ears. Come on, it's not like we have much choice, unless you want to spend the night in the car. A particularly loud crack of thunder made us both jump. Alex sighed in defeat. All right, fine, but if we end up murdered by some backwoods psycho, I'm blaming you in the afterlife. We grabbed our jackets and flashlights, then stepped out into the storm. The wind nearly knocked me off my feet, and within seconds, I was soaked to the bone. We stumbled down the dirt road, our shoes squelching in the mud with every step. As we got closer, details of the farmhouse emerged from the gloom. It was an old two-story structure, its white paint peeling to reveal weatherwood beneath. A wraparound porch sagged slightly, littered with rusted farm equipment and ancient rocking chairs. "Charming," Alex muttered as we approached the front steps. I climbed onto the porch, grateful for the momentary respite from the rain. Taking a deep breath, I raised my fist and knocked on the door. The sound seemed to echo unnaturally in the storm's din. We waited, exchanging nervous glances as the seconds ticked by. Just as I was about to knock again, I heard movement from inside. Slow, shuffling footsteps approached the door. It creaked open, revealing a stooped, elderly man. His face was a maze of wrinkles, pale blue eyes regarding us with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. "Can I help you boys?" he asked, his voice barely audible above the storm. I cleared my throat. "I'm sorry to bother you so late, sir. Our car broke down on the highway, and we were hoping we could use your phone to call for help." The old man's eyes narrowed slightly. He glanced past us, out into the storm, then back to our rain-soaked figures. For a moment, I was certain he was going to turn us away. But then his expression softened, just a fraction. "I suppose you'd better come in," he said, stepping back from the door. "Though I'm afraid I don't have a working phone. Haven't for years." My heart sank, but the prospect of getting out of the rain was too tempting to pass up. We followed him into a dimly lit living room, its walls lined with faded photographs and dusty knickknacks. "Name's Harold," the old man said, gesturing for us to sit on a worn sofa. "You boys wait here. I'll fetch some towels." As Harold shuffled out of the room, Alex leaned in close to me. "This place gives me the creeps," he whispered. "We should just wait out the storm on the porch." I was about to agree when something caught my eye. One of the photographs on the wall showed a much younger Harold standing next to a woman and a little girl. But there was something off about the image. I stood up for a closer look. The woman's face had been scratched out. A floorboard creaked behind me, and I spun around. Harold stood in the doorway, a stack of towels in his arms. His eyes flicked to the photograph, then back to me. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "Here," he said gruffly, tossing us the towels. "Dry yourselves off. I'll make some tea." As Harold disappeared into the kitchen, Alex and I exchanged uneasy glances. "Did you see that photo?" I whispered. He nodded, his face pale. "Yeah, and did you notice? There are no recent pictures anywhere. It's like time stopped in this house decades ago." A crash of thunder made us both jump. Lightning illuminated the room, casting long shadows across the floor. And in that brief flash, I could have sworn I saw a figure standing at the top of the stairs. A small figure, like a child. "We need to leave," I said, my voice shaking. "Now!" But before we could move, Harold returned, carrying a tray with 3 steaming mugs. "Drink up," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "It'll warm you up." I took the mug hesitantly, the porcelain burning hot against my cold fingers. The tea had an odd, bitter smell that made my stomach churn. Alex caught my eye, giving a subtle shake of his head. Neither of us raised the mugs to our lips. Harold watched us intently, his pale eyes never blinking. The silence stretched on, broken only by the howling wind outside. Finally, he spoke. "You remind me of my daughter," he said, his gaze fixed on me. "She was about your age when she left. Said she couldn't stand another day in this cursed house. That was 30 years ago." I swallowed hard. "I'm sorry," I managed to say. "That must have been difficult." A shadow passed over Harold's face. "Oh, she came back," he said softly. "They always come back in the end." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. "What do you mean?" Harold's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "This land has a way of keeping its own," he said. "The storm brought you here for a reason, boys, just like it brought all the others." Alex stood up abruptly. "Thank you for your hospitality, sir, but I think we should be going." We moved towards the door, but Harold was faster than he looked. He blocked our path, suddenly seeming much larger and more imposing than before. "I'm afraid I can't let you leave," he said, all pretense of friendliness gone from his voice. "The house has chosen you. It's been so long since we've had guests." That's when we heard it, the sound of small, bare feet padding down the stairs. A child's giggle echoed through the house, sending chills down my spine. "Run!" I shouted, shoving past Harold with all my strength. Alex was right behind me as we burst out onto the porch and into the raging storm. We sprinted down the muddy driveway, hearts pounding in our ears. I dared a glance back and immediately wished I hadn't. Silhouetted in the doorway was Harold, and next to him, the impossible figure of a little girl in an old-fashioned dress. Her eyes glowed in the darkness, fixed on our retreating forms. We didn't stop running until we reached the highway, gasping for breath and soaked to the bone once more. In the distance, the farmhouse was barely visible through the rain. What the hell was that?" Alex panted, doubling over with his hands on his knees. I shook my head, unable to form words. The image of that ghostly child was seared into my mind. Suddenly, headlights appeared on the horizon. We waved our arms frantically, and to our immense relief, the car slowed to a stop beside us. An older couple peered out at us with concern. "Are you boys all right?" the woman asked. "What are you doing out here in this storm?" We clambered into the back seat, babbling our thanks. As the car pulled away, I looked back one last time at the dirt road leading to the farmhouse. For just a moment, I thought I saw two figures standing in the middle of the road, one tall, one small, watching us drive away. I blinked, and they were gone. We never spoke about that night again, Alex and I. Some experiences are too strange, too terrifying to put into words. But sometimes on stormy nights when the wind howls just right, I find myself thinking about that old farmhouse and its ghostly inhabitants. And I wonder how many other lost travelers have found themselves on that lonely dirt road, lured in by the promise of shelter from the storm. Some doors once opened can never truly be closed again, and some storms, it seems, never really end. The first text message sent a chill down my spine. By the last one, I was certain I wouldn't live to see morning. It's funny how quickly a quiet night of babysitting can turn into a fight for survival. I never should have taken the job, but when Mrs. Carlson called, desperate for someone to watch her kids at the last minute, I caved. The extra cash would help with my college textbooks, and besides, I babysat for them before. 8-year-old Lily and 5-year-old Max were good kids, if a bit rambunctious. How bad could one night be? The storm started rolling in just as I arrived at the Carlsons' sprawling Victorian home. Thunder rumbled in the distance as Mrs. Carlson rushed out the door, rattling off instructions and emergency numbers. "Oh, and the storm might knock out the power," she added, already halfway to her car. "There are flashlights in the kitchen drawer if you need them. Thanks again, Emma." And then she was gone, leaving me alone with the kids and the growing tempest outside. The evening started off normally enough. We had dinner, played some board games, and then it was time for bed. Max went down easily, worn out from a day of playing. Lily, ever the night owl, bargained for an extra half-hour of TV time before reluctantly trudging upstairs. I settled onto the living room couch, flipping through channels and half listening to the storm raging outside. The old house creaked and groaned as the wind battered against it. I pulled a throw blanket around my shoulders, trying to shake off the chill that seemed to have seeped into my bones. That's when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You look cozy," it read. I frowned, glancing around the room. All the curtains were drawn. There was no way anyone could see me. It had to be a wrong number. "Sorry, I think you are the wrong person," I texted back. Almost immediately, another message came through. "No mistake, Emma. I can see you perfectly." My heart began to race. This couldn't be happening. It was just a prank, right? Maybe one of my friends playing a sick joke? I stood up, double-checking that all the doors and windows were locked. As I passed by the front window, a flash of lightning illuminated the yard. For a split second, I could have sworn I saw a figure standing among the trees at the edge of the property. I blinked, and it was gone. My phone buzzed again. Don't bother with the locks. I'm already inside. A scream caught in my throat. I ran to the stairs, taking them two at a time. I had to check on the kids. Lily's room was closest. I burst in, half expecting to find an intruder looming over her bed. But she was sleeping peacefully, her nightlight casting a soft glow around the room. I moved to Max's room next. He, too, was undisturbed. I leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath. I was overreacting. It was just a storm and my overactive imagination getting the best of me. Then my phone buzzed again. The children are safe. For now. It's you I'm after, Emma. Ice flooded my veins. This wasn't a prank. This was real. Someone was in the house, watching my every move. I crept back downstairs, my eyes darting to every shadow, every dark corner. The storm seemed to have intensified, rain lashing against the windows. I grabbed a heavy candlestick from the mantel, clutching it like a lifeline. Who are you? I texted back with shaking fingers. What do you want? The response came almost instantly. You'll find out soon enough. But first, let's play a little game. Before I could respond, the lights flickered once, twice, and then plunged the house into darkness. I bit back a scream, fumbling for my phone's flashlight. The beam cut through the gloom, casting long shadows that seemed to move and shift with a life of their own. Another text. Basement door. 1 minute. If you're not there, the kids pay the price. My mind raced. I couldn't leave the children, but I couldn't risk their lives either. With my heart pounding in my ears, I made my way to the basement door. My hand hovered over the knob, every instinct screaming at me not to open it. My phone buzzed. Time's up. Open the door, Emma. Taking a deep breath, I turned the knob and pulled the door open. The beam of my flashlight illuminated a set of rickety wooden stairs descending into inky blackness. The musty smell of damp earth wafted up, making me gag. Down you go, came another text. And leave your phone at the top of the stairs. I hesitated. My phone was my only lifeline, my only source of light. But then I thought of Lily and Max sleeping upstairs, blissfully unaware of the danger they were in. I set the phone down, the screen casting a feeble glow. With the candlestick clutched tightly in my hand, I took my first step into the darkness. The stairs creaked ominously under my weight. I counted each step, trying to steady my breathing. 10, 11, 12. My foot hit solid ground. I stood there in the pitch black, straining my ears for any sound. Nothing but the muffled rumble of thunder from above. Hello, I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm here. What do you want? Silence. Then a click. A single bare bulb flickered to life, swaying gently from the ceiling. Its weak light revealed a cluttered basement, filled with dusty boxes and forgotten furniture. And there in the far corner stood a figure. He was tall, dressed all in black, with a hood pulled low over his face. In his hand gleamed the blade of a knife. Hello, Emma, he said, his voice low and raspy. I've been waiting a long time for this. I raised the candlestick, my arms trembling. Stay back, I warned. I'll scream. I'll wake the whole neighborhood. He chuckled, the sound sending chills down my spine. No one will hear you over the storm. And besides, you wouldn't want to scare the children, would you? What do you want? I asked again, trying to keep my voice from shaking. Money? I can get you money. The figure took a step closer. I could see his eyes now, cold and dark beneath the hood. This isn't about money, Emma. This is about justice. Justice? I repeated, confused. Don't understand. I've never done anything to you. He tilted his head, regarding me curiously. Not to me, no. But to Sarah? You remember Sarah, don't you? The name hit me like a physical blow. Sarah, my best friend in high school. The girl who had... How do you know about Sarah? I whispered. The figure took another step forward. I retreated until my back hit the cold cement wall. I know everything, Emma. I know how you betrayed her, how you spread those rumors, how you turned the whole school against her. Memories I'd long buried came flooding back. The whispered conversations, the cruel laughter, the look of betrayal in Sarah's eyes when she realized what I'd done. That was years ago, I said, my voice cracking. I was young and stupid. I didn't know. Didn't know what, he snarled. Didn't know that your actions would drive her to suicide? Didn't know that her family would be destroyed? That her little brother would grow up without a sister? Realization dawned, cold and terrible. You're Sarah's brother? He pulled back his hood, revealing a face that was at once familiar and strange. I could see echoes of Sarah in his features, twisted now with grief and rage. My name is Jake, he said, and I've spent the last 5 years planning this moment, watching you go about your life, carefree and happy, while my family fell apart. It ends tonight. He lunged forward, the knife flashing in the dim light. I swung the candlestick wildly, feeling it connect with something solid. Jake stumbled back with a grunt of pain. I didn't wait to see if he was down. I bolted for the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps thundering up the wooden steps. I burst through the basement door, snatching my phone from where I'd left it. My fingers flew over the screen, dialing 911 as I raced for the front door. Just as the operator answered, the power came back on, flooding the house with light. And there, standing between me and freedom, was Jake. Blood trickled from a gash on his forehead, where I'd struck him with the candlestick. "It's over, Emma," he said, raising the knife. "Time to pay for what you did." In that moment, with my back against the wall and a madman advancing on me, something snapped inside. All the guilt, all the regret I'd buried over the years came rushing to the surface. "You're right," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. What I did to Sarah was unforgivable. Not a day goes by that I don't regret it. But this won't bring her back. It won't ease your pain. All it will do is destroy another life. Jake faltered, confusion flickering across his face. You admit it? Just like that. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. I was a coward then, but I'm not running from it anymore. I'll turn myself in, tell the police everything. Sarah's story deserves to be told, but not like this. Please, Jake, don't become a monster because of what I did. For a long moment, the only sound was the storm raging outside and our ragged breathing. Then, slowly, Jake lowered the knife. "I've lived with this anger for so long," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I don't know how to let it go." "Then let me help you," I said, taking a cautious step forward. "We can face this together. For Sarah." As if on cue, police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer by the second. Jake looked at me, then at the knife in his hand. With a choked sob, he let it clatter to the floor. When the police burst through the door moments later, they found us both on our knees, crying for the girl we had both loved and lost in different ways. The storm raged on outside, but inside, a different kind of tempest was finally beginning to calm. The long night was over, but the real work of healing, of atonement, of forgiveness was only just beginning.